All right, just like we talked about mouse traps, there's a variety of rat traps as well. So we have our traditional rat trap here with the metal trigger. And like the metal trigger, it has the same problems as we had with the mouse trap, namely that the bait can be removed rather easily. And they're not quite as efficient as the expanded trigger traps. Now you notice some letters here, soft, firm, S and F. Hopefully you'll be able to see that there. But you'll notice that what that refers to is the way that you can set the trap so that the trigger is more firm or soft depending on what your particular desire is or the situation that you're involved with is. So if you have a choice, the expanded trigger trap is going to be a much better use for you as a professional or even as a homeowner than the typical old-fashioned metal trap. But again, these are more expensive, and so you have to keep that in mind. We also have clamshell traps. Again, the advantage of clamshell traps is they have one-hand design. They also have a bait area, very easy to use, expanded trigger model. And again, they have the grooves to try to clamp down on that particular rat. So they have the ability for you to release that trapped rat and dump it into a trash can. But rat traps aren't just used for rats. They can also be used for ground squirrels as well, and for flying squirrels if you're having an issue with flying squirrels, because they're strong enough for that. Typically for gray squirrels or fox squirrels, these types of traps are just not quite big enough. You can get away with using them occasionally, but they're not ideal for larger squirrel species. But for ground squirrels like Richardson ground squirrels, you can certainly use rat traps to catch them, and that can be another tool in your toolbox, so to speak. And of course, we also have our larger Strikebar trap. Again, this has the advantage of, again, that one-hand design so that you don't have to be fussing with this part when you're dealing with a dead animal, and so it provides you a little bit safer access. Again, it has a nice little bait area here, and it's easy setting, but again, more expensive. And these have holes drilled in, so you can actually screw them to walls and boards and that sort of thing that allow you some flexibility to catch rats or rodents that are climbing things, or you just want to anchor it down so it doesn't get dragged away. Now, we've talked about the types of traps, but I wanted to talk about the ways that you can modify your rat traps to make them more effective. So since a lot of you will be using this type of trap because they are a cheaper version, is I want to talk to you a little bit about the importance of making sure that these these anchor bars for your spring are placed underneath a washer. Now notice the difference between these two traps here. These anchor bars are being embedded into the wood, so you're actually losing some of the spring power that the striker bar is going to have. When you put a washer or sometimes a screw underneath these two wires, you actually increase the striking power of your striker bar. When you're dealing with a rat, rats are tough, and you want this bar coming across and hitting him like there is nobody's business, so that he doesn't have a chance to get his way back. And so that is why you want to be sure to modify your traps to make sure that the power of that striker bar is coming at him full force. And that's a very simple modification to your trap. And you can do that with whatever trap you're using, whether you're using the old-fashioned design or the newer design, and this will strengthen and make that striker bar hit harder because you want that concussive blow to be very strong. Now, what about safety issues? Sometimes people get nervous about putting traps outdoors, and you want to be careful when you're putting traps outdoors because some of the baits that you're going to be using are going to be attractive to birds, and you don't want to be trapping birds because chances are you'll be in violation of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And you don't want to be catching and having your traps disturbed by other rodents that you're not interested in catching, for instance. So one of the ways you can reduce the risk of that happening is using rat-sized bait stations. And so some of your traps are designed to be placed inside of the bait station like this. So that way you're able to cover this over, and so the rodent will go inside and get trapped but you're not going to have a likelihood of a child getting involved here because you're going to secure this just as if there was poison inside. And so you're able to trap that animal, and it's also going to be out of public view. If you have clients, sometimes clients don't want to see a dead animal. But just make sure you check the type of bait station that you're using, because not all bait stations are designed for select traps. For example, here we have our standard trap and it doesn't fit. So, and again, manufacturers want to sell you the traps that fit for their bait stations. It's sort of a marketing thing. It's the same way they do with what, you know, companies do with batteries, for instance. They use sometimes some funky batteries to force you to keep buying their battery and not using something that's over the counter. That's just the deal that you have to fuss with. But if you're using a professionally manufactured bait station, just make sure the traps you're buying are going to fit inside, and it gives you an alternative to using toxicants to control certain rodents. There are also specialized boxes that are just designed to hold rat traps. And if you could grab that for me down there. And this is one of them. This is created by J.T. Eaton. And it's a little bent up here, but they work fine. I think I damaged it somehow. But again, it's big enough to fit 2 rat-sized traps inside. And you can even, depending on how you bend them, I believe they'll also fit the larger versions as well. And again, this is another way of having a station to have your rat traps in that make it safer for use in areas where you have children, pets, or other non-target animals that you don't want to catch. So definitely put this in your toolbox, and traps can be an effective tool for controlling a variety of rodents.